Hi, everyone. Thank you guys all for being here. I know it's beautiful out, so we really appreciate you coming to our STEMinar today. So today we're going to be hearing from Courtney, and she's a graduate student here at Columbia, and she's going to be telling us about her research, and she has some really cool stuff planned for the next 30 minutes or hour or so. Okay, so Courtney, I'm just going to ask you a few questions about being a graduate student, and then we'll let you take it away, I guess.
Awesome.
So I know that you are going to get into a lot of this, so I'll kind of keep this brief, but I guess why don't you just start by saying what year you're in and the lab you're in. Do you work, I guess, in a lab we can clearly see behind you? Is that in the city? Stuff like
Yes.
that.
So I'm a fourth year PhD student at Columbia, as was said before, and I work in Gerard Eteshin's lab. We're called the Musculoskeletal Biomechanics lab. So I'm a mechanical engineer. That's what I did my undergrad in, and I work with other mechanical engineers and biomedical engineers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about today how those things work together, mechanical engineering and also like the body and biology. But yeah, so this is my lab space right now. You're just looking at half of it. But yeah, we're on Morningside campus at Columbia, right in New York City. And so it's great.
Nice.
Lucky
Cool.
to have a window.
Yeah. So I guess I know you're also, oops, there's close. Oh gosh, sorry everyone. I don't know what I just did on my iPad. So I know you're going to get into this, but I guess we always ask people that give talks what they say is the most rewarding part about being a scientist and a grad student, and then also what is the most difficult part that you think you face?
Those are really good questions. I think the most rewarding part is when you're running an experiment and well, I guess when you finish running an experiment and you're analyzing your results and you get to publish a paper or like publish these results that no one has ever done before. So I think that's really cool about science, and especially in graduate school, you have the opportunity to do things that nobody else is doing. Which I think is really, really cool and a very unique experience. So much of what we do, everyone has done a million times before. So I love being in a PhD program where we're trying to do novel new things and teach everyone else about what we're learning. So I think that's the like really rewarding part about science in general, and especially about being a grad student. It's definitely difficult. I have spent the first 3 years, so I guess I'm just finishing up my fourth year. I'll be a fifth year next year, and the first 3 to 4 years are definitely like it's a lot of hustling where I feel like I haven't made a lot of progress, even though I have. I've learned a ton. I've gained so many new skills, but I haven't like actually published these papers that I want to publish yet. So I think it's hard balancing like recognizing that you are learning so much, even if you don't have a physical paper that you've published in front of you to show for it. And it's just busy, but it's all fun. It's something I'm so interested in and love doing, that even though it takes a lot of time and can be very stressful at times when you're not getting the results that you want, or you're like what you're working on isn't working the way you expected it to, you still are learning, and that's like exciting at the same time.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like we have so many different scientists give these talks, and like everyone always has the same, the most rewarding part and the most difficult part. It's always the same. It really shows that we all have the same fundamental, like passion and issues that we
Yeah,
face, which is cool.
yeah, and that's what's really cool about science and about just also like STEM in general, is it's really uniting, I think.
Yeah,
If we're focusing on
definitely.
entirely different problems.
Definitely. Okay, well, cool. Thank you for that. So I guess now I'm just going to mute myself and let you take over. For anyone that's new to these seminars, if you have any questions, just feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt. Or if you don't want to unmute yourself and you don't want to talk, feel free to put it in the chat and I can monitor it and I can ask your question for you. Yeah, so with that, we'll let you take it away, Courtney.
Great,
Thanks.
thank you so much. Yeah, so I'll just reiterate, please, like especially we have a small group today. We don't have very many of us, and so in a way that's awesome because it can be more interactive. So please, if you have any questions about something I said or didn't say, just stop me and butt in. I don't mind at all. I love questions, so yeah, feel comfortable asking them. Anyway, but I'll dive right into it. So as you've been looking at for the past 5 minutes, my talk today is titled Engineering plus the Human Body equals Biomechanics. So often we think of mechanical engineers as designing and building machines like planes and robots, but did you know they also study the human body? And our bodies can be viewed as engineering structures and complex machines. And so as a fourth year PhD student at Columbia, that's what I literally spend all day, every day working on. And I think it's really fascinating. I'm going to give you a little bit of my background and then jump into kind of what I'm working on now. So I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. I love this photo here. Can you see my mouse? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, perfect. So I love this photo here on the left. Salt Lake is this little town. Well, it's a city, but compared to New York, it's a little town literally tucked right next to the mountains. And because of that, I spent weekends and all the time that I could skiing and hiking and all that comes with having the mountains in such close proximity. And along with that, I played a lot of sports. I wasn't that great at soccer, but I did play for a very long time. And then I found lacrosse, which I thought I was good at, but until I moved to the East Coast, I learned that lacrosse over here is a whole different ballgame than in the West in Utah. But anyway, so I'll get back to that in a second. In middle school, my best subject was math. I enjoyed it. I was good at it. I loved it. I will say I was a little embarrassed in the beginning that was my best subject. I thought that girls didn't, that wasn't something that girls were supposed to do or were supposed to be good at. But thanks to some amazing friends and teachers who really encouraged me to follow the things that I was good at and the things I enjoyed, come the end of middle school, I really embraced it. And just as you can see now, I'm a PhD student in mechanical engineering. So I full on went for the passion of math. And so in high school, I started taking some physics classes and I loved those as well. And I remember I started to play lacrosse soon after I learned in physics about centripetal acceleration. And I totally geeked out about it. So if you don't play lacrosse, you have to do this motion called cradling, where you are holding the stick like this girl is doing right here, and you move it in a circular motion around your body. And when you cradle, that circular motion puts the ball, you can see the yellow ball on her stick, applies what's called a centripetal acceleration, which in turn creates a force on that ball. And that's the reason why it stays in your stick. So as long as you keep cradling, the ball stays in your stick. And if you stop cradling, you stop creating this force and the ball falls right out. So I connected that to physics and was just mind blown. I'm like, oh my gosh, our everyday lives, sports, they're connected to physics. It was so cool. And then I started thinking more about other things that I did, like skiing. I skied a ton. And while you're skiing, you make all sorts of physics influenced decisions without even realizing it, from the way you shift your weight over your skis to the way you make yourself more or less aerodynamic by crouching or by standing up to help yourself speed up or slow down. And in soccer, you're mentally calculating the trajectory of your shot based on the way your foot strikes the ball, how hard you kick it, where your body's facing. It's all physics. And that was the first time for me, was in high school in my physics class, recognizing how much science influences our everyday lives without us even realizing it. So when it came time for me to apply to college, I had no clue what kind of major would make the most sense for me. I liked math and I liked physics, and that's all I knew. And I had an amazing physics teacher who mentored me a lot. He answered all of my questions. I had a ton of questions. And sidebar about that, you should always ask all of your questions that you have, whether it's you're asking in class or out of class or emailing the professor or asking a friend. Just keep asking those questions as you move on through high school, through college, and even into your careers. Asking questions is what's gotten me to where I am now. So anyway, I asked this teacher, I was like, I don't know. Sorry, excuse me, I need some water. I don't know what might be a good fit. I like math and physics. What should I major? All the college applications want me to check the box of what I'm gonna like for the rest of my life. And he suggested that maybe mechanical engineering would be a good fit. So on a whim, sorry, I think I got too excited and was talking too loud. So on a whim, I checked the mechanical engineering box, and that's what I started majoring in college. So it was very haphazard. So what is a mechanical engineer? And to be honest, I obviously did not know what it was when I was starting out of high school. And it still took me a couple of years, I think maybe like till my second or third year in college, to really start to get a grasp on what mechanical engineers did. But even by then, I still didn't know what types of jobs were available to them and what I wanted to do after graduation. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let me just.
No worries at all. Feel free to take a minute.
Okay, hopefully we're good. I apologize. Anyway, so I didn't know what a mechanical engineer did, but here's my perspective now. It's super broad, but I think this is the best definition I can offer. So mechanical engineers are involved in some step of the process with basically everything that you see around you. Anything that you could pick up and touch, mechanical engineers probably had some sort of hand in building it. Many other things, I won't get into too much detail, but essentially they design and build machines or structures and objects that use and transfer forces. So a few examples: robots, air conditioners, skis, bikes, cars, planes, running shoes, even prosthetics. All of these are designed and built by mechanical engineers. So how do we do it? We use a combination of math and physics equations, computer programs, experiments, prototypes, collaboration, and a lot of teamwork. Anyway, so I wanted to give you a one-slide tidbit on what my engineering experience in college and in my undergraduate and my graduate has been so far. So this, just on the left here, this photo is what was in my mechanical engineering building in undergrad, and I loved walking past it every day. It's just very iconic: cars, gears. On the bottom left, this photo, this is a thermal camera, a picture of a handprint. So someone just put a handprint on their desk, picked up their hand, and we used the thermal camera to capture it, which I think is so cool. Right next to that, we have, this is me donning all my welding gear I designed and built a surgical tool here at Columbia, and there was a part of it that we had to weld, so it was exciting to get to do that. And then on the top here, one of my assignments in undergrad was a group assignment, and they gave us a box of Legos and they said, build something that moves. So we made a bridge that opens and closes. And that was very exciting, a very fun project. And then lastly, here on the right, this is a mechanical testing device that's really common in mechanical engineering. It's like the most basic test that we do to characterize materials is called a tension test. And so this particular material you see is a strip of carbon fiber. It's about 1.5 inches wide and maybe 6 or 7 inches long. And they actually have this same machine at Columbia. I haven't seen it yet, but I know it exists somewhere. This is in Washington. So what happens is these two clamps on top of bottom hold onto the material, and they just start pulling it apart. And we just watch and we see when it breaks. And that tells us a lot about the material. So here's a little video of carbon fiber. It's very brittle. So if you can see it, like, shoots off super fast right here in the middle. Anyway,
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah,
Oh,
please.
sorry. Is it breaking because it's getting pulled apart, right? Am I seeing that right?
Yeah, so what's happening is these two clamps are pulling enough and applying enough force and enough strain, which is the change in thickness or the change in length of a sample. And so it's applying enough force and enough strain that it gets to a point where the carbon fiber can't handle it anymore. And it just breaks. You can actually see right here, this is the little piece as it's like flying out. Yes, it like went underneath the guard we had up and everything. Yeah. Any more questions about mechanical testing or that while I'm here on this slide? So all of this background, I just wanted to like give you a fun little snippet of what mechanical engineers do in general and the variety that we like experience in college as well as in careers. But I've specifically chosen to focus my work and my career on the human body. So like I was mentioning earlier with skiing, lacrosse, soccer, we can view the human body as an engineering structure and as a machine. And so here are just a couple examples from an engineering perspective of the body. So for example, we could look at failure mechanisms and take an analogy between what we see in the world, such as a bridge breaking or failing due to some like force or some weakness in the bridge itself, similar to an arm breaking due to some weakness in the arm or some force that was applied. We can also look at shock absorbers in cars or bikes. So as this car goes over the bumps, you can see that the spring is compressing and is absorbing the energy of that bump. And we can compare that to, for example, cartilage in our knee or in our different joints in the body. So this is a video that was taken in my lab about 10 years ago in 2010. And this is a patella or your kneecap on top. And the yellow is the bone, the white is the cartilage. And ignore the black speckles, that's just an imaging technique we use. And then the bottom is the femur, or your leg bone that connects your hip to your knee. So in this study, they just compress the patella into the femur, and you can see how much the cartilage deforms and acts as the shock absorber in your knee. So I really like to look at these analogies and see, try to see the world and our human body very similarly, rather than just like one's biology, one's engineering. They're all interconnected. So my lab focuses specifically on cartilage and osteoarthritis. So we spend all of our time trying to characterize the properties of cartilage. So I guess what exactly is it? Cartilage is, like I said, essentially the shock absorber of your body. It's everywhere in your body. It's all over. Wherever you have a joint, there's cartilage between those two bones to make sure that, well, it's there for a number of reasons, but one is to absorb the shock and the energy between those joints. So you can see in this skeleton, there's like bluish white drawn everywhere. So here in the elbow, in the shoulder, in the knee, even in the toes and the fingers and the hip, all of that is called articular cartilage. And cartilage itself is made up of primarily water, surprisingly. So you can think of it as a sponge that has this what's called an extracellular matrix all around, and that's like the sponge, and then it absorbs water, fluid, in your body. And osteoarthritis is a disease of the joint. So this is what a normal healthy joint looks like. This is a knee, and this blue, this is cartilage in the femur. You can see a little bit of cartilage on the tibia beneath. So this is what a joint should look like. And when someone has osteoarthritis, it means that cartilage has started wearing away and degrading and exposing the bone underneath it, which is really painful. So instead of having that shock absorber and that protection between your two bones, now you just have bones grinding on each other, and it can be a really debilitating disease. You may have heard of like people, your grandparents or other people that you know having talking about arthritis and how it's stiff and makes it hard for them to walk or to move. This is what's happening in the body. So that's like a very simple version of what my lab studies. And we're trying to find a way to treat osteoarthritis that doesn't involve a total joint replacement, which is the most common treatment right now. It's just a really big invasive surgery that if we can avoid it, we'd like to. So that's what we're studying. So we, even though we're studying articular cartilage, and even though it occurs all over the body, we primarily look at the knee, and that's just the easiest joint for our purposes. And so even though we focus on cartilage, it's important to know the entire knee anatomy, to know what you're looking at and how everything works together. So I thought that's what we would do today. So I'm going to go through the knee anatomy with you briefly, and then we're going to go ahead and show you a more interactive demo, which I'll get into in a second. So let's start with the bones. First of all, you have the patella, which is not shown in this big picture, but the patella is your kneecap. You can see it in this little skeleton here. So it would rest right about here. And then you have your femur, which connects your knee to your hip. And you have your tibia, which connects your knee to your ankle. And then you have your fibula, which supports the tibia. So now let's move on to the soft tissue. And soft tissue is exactly what it sounds like. It's tissue or material in your body that is soft. So it includes ligaments, tendons, cartilage, etc. So the LCL and the MCL, or the lateral and collateral ligaments, provide general knee stability. So the LCL, which is shown here on the, so if you can see, we're looking at this knee, and so the LCL is on the outside. It is attached to the fibula. L stands for lateral, and lateral in medical terminology means outside. And then MCL is on the inside of the knee, so it'd be right here on the skeleton. And that stands for medial, which is the medical term for inside. So if you're thinking about your right knee, your LCL is on your right side and your MCL is on your left side. So next we have the ACL and PCL, which everyone I feel like has heard of the ACL or knows someone who has torn their ACL. These stand for the anterior and posterior, or anterior means in front of and posterior means in back of, cruciate ligaments. So cruciate, these ligaments are crossing, and you can kind of see, it's hard to tell, but you can see the ACL right here, kind of crossing over, and then the PCL crossing behind it. And these provide the twisting stability of the knee. And then lastly, well, not lastly, but we have the meniscus, which is a piece of cartilage, but it's actually a different type of cartilage than what I've been talking about previous. It's called fibrocartilage. It just has a little bit different of a structure. That's not that important right now, but it provides extra cushioning between your femur and tibia. And then what you have here on the top, this is cartilage, and that's on what we call your femoral condyle. So you'll hear me refer to that soon. That's the rounded part of your femur at the very bottom. And then the tibial plateau is also has cartilage on it, and that's the top, the flat part of your tibia. Any questions about anatomy?
I have a super quick question.
Yeah.
So I feel like you kind of said this, like you hear a lot of athletes and people that tear their ACL.
Yeah.
Why is it I feel like I mostly hear about the ACL, and I know it's probably because of the twisting motion, but why not the PCL then?
So often people tear you'll hear ACL and meniscus, or ACL and PCL, and they're often torn together is my understanding of it.
Gotcha.
But the ACL is I think it to be honest, I don't know the exact question, but if I had to guess, it's because it does go through more of the center of your knee, whereas the PCL is, it still crosses, but it's more in the back. So I think it's probably harder to tear because that's where your joint bends anyway. So there's a little more slack. It's not under quite as much tension as the ACL is.
Cool. I don't think I realized it was quite in the middle of the knee like that. I don't know what I thought it was, but
yeah, I never really knew until I started working in this lab and doing joint dissections, which is the perfect segue into what we're about to do next. So in our lab, and often as scientists, we turn to animal models to answer questions about the human body. And there are a surprising number of similarities between our bodies and animals. So in my lab, we usually work with cow or bovine joints. And when we're trying to run experiments, or we want to do a test on cartilage, like that test I showed you with the carbon fiber, we would use cartilage from what we use in our lab is most often cow or bovine. Bovine's just another word for cow. But there are a number of different models that people use. So what I'm going to show you now is an actual knee dissection, bovine knee dissection, as if we were about to run an experiment. And so we had to get the cartilage from this knee.
Wow, that's it's crazy how much more complicated the knee joint is. I don't know, that's just so surprising to me. Just seeing you dissect it, there's so much more there than I would expect.
Yeah, I think I'll just leave my camera like this. I guess I can actually go back to my slides. But yeah, it's interesting to be able to see like see it in person and recognize like, oh my gosh, so much going on with this. Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I'm back. Cool. Yeah, so any questions or anything that people are curious about? I can bring the slides back again. Yeah, happy to answer anything now. That's all I've got.
I think I just have like one more question.
Yeah.
And then I'll stop bugging. So, but if you guys are like isolating cartilage, is your goal to like, I guess, figure out its properties and its strength and then try and make something like to mimic that for people that have arthritis?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So there are actually many different goals. In the beginning, before I joined the lab, like years before, when cartilage was still relatively unstudied, I guess, then people in my lab were taking, we'll take little punches. So we'll get like little cylinders of cartilage, do tests on them. And they were trying to determine like, what's the stiffness of cartilage? How does it behave? And there have been a lot of studies done to characterize the properties of cartilage itself. And we still do some of that. And we specifically look at like friction, like how does cartilage behave when it's like rubbing back and forth across itself, because we know that that's what's happening in our joints. So there's a lot of work that's done on that. There's other work that's done in tissue engineering, which I haven't done much of, but our lab used to do that, and we have some collaborating labs that still work on tissue engineering. And so what their goal is to grow and to build something that mimics cartilage that they can then implant in a body, or they can like put the cells in the body and know that it will grow around itself. So that's another method, or another like focus that some people take. And I'm specifically working on a lot of computer modeling. So I didn't show that today because I felt like this was a better like background and context for what I do, but I have scans, 3D models of the knee joints similar to what you saw. And I'm like running models and experiments to see like what are the forces under certain like properties and under certain situations and that kind of thing. So there are a lot of different reasons,
a lot of options.
Reasons that we might be doing dissections or isolating the cartilage.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, if anyone else has questions, feel free to ask them or to put them in the chat. Yeah, that was really awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you for having me. Also, again, I'm free to answer questions right now, but if you're curious about whether it's research or college or being a graduate student or an undergrad or mechanical engineering or biomedical engineering, any of that, and you think of questions later, you are more than welcome to email me. I put my email here at the bottom, cas2331@columbia.edu. But there's, including now, there were lots of times in my life where I felt like I didn't know anyone who could answer some of the questions that I had about science and engineering, and it was always helpful when I could attend certain things like these and meet someone who was willing to answer some questions for me, since my family wasn't in the same like industry that I wanted to go in. So I love helping and answering questions and just giving my perspective if anyone ever is interested in that kind of thing.
I think we have a question in the chat. What is the reason why articular cartilage has a limited capacity to grow/repair?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So cartilage, when we are mature adults, and mature meaning our bodies have grown to maturity, we're done growing, cartilage no longer has a direct blood supply. So bone always has blood flowing through it. And many of our tissues always have a direct blood supply. And the blood itself can bring a lot of nutrients as it flows to the tissue. But cartilage, because it doesn't have that blood supply directly like to the source, to the cartilage, then it's limited in the nutrients that it receives and how often it receives those. So synovial fluid is the fluid that's inside the joint capsules. So you didn't see it today because this is a joint that's already, it was already dissected. But when you first open a joint capsule, so when you first start cutting through the tissue, there's fluid inside, not a ton, but a little bit of fluid, and it's kind of yellow and almost the consistency of like an egg white. And that's called synovial fluid. And the synovial fluid seeps through the synovium and brings some nutrients with it, but it's not as efficient as bringing nutrients through the blood supply. So that's why it doesn't have as much of a capacity to repair and to grow. And that's something that our lab is looking a lot at, is trying to figure out how does the cartilage repair it all, and can we help that happen faster so that people who have osteoarthritis or OA can actually like repair their own joint.
It's cool. Just as opposed to putting something artificial, I guess, try and figure out how you can just boost the body and allow it to make more.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. That was a great question. Anything else? It can be about cartilage or otherwise.
It's so cool to see like someone that did engineering studying, I don't know, the human body. I feel like I'm very used to thinking of like the traditional, like, make a bridge, or I don't know, make a robot. It's really cool to apply it to the human body, because you're right, it's just like the exact same properties.
It's the exact same thing. We're just looking at a different machine, and it's our body instead of the airplane or something. And that was something, like, the reason I got into this field was because I went to a career fair in college and I was trying to find jobs to apply to, and for when I graduated, and nothing seemed exciting to me or interesting. And I was like, I started engineering because I knew it could be interesting, and like, where are the cool jobs? But anyway, so then I ended up taking a class and was able to kind of find this path, and that was something that really interested me and was exciting. So that's how I got here where I am now.
Very cool. Well, thank you everyone else for coming. Again, feel free to ask a question. If you don't have any more questions, just thank you for coming. Go enjoy the weather. And thank you so much for showing us that joint and like sharing the resource with us. It was just like a great opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you all enjoyed it and it was more interesting than it was gross to look at.
Definitely, it definitely was.
Yeah, I appreciate you all being here. Thanks for coming to the STEMinar today.